I've been through the car wash.
Been through the car wash.
Yeah.
That was going to be my first question, though, is just, how's it going?
Mm-hmm.
Because, obviously, I'm sure this has been a whirlwind.
Yeah. It still feels surreal. And every experience I get to do, something like this included, you're just like, I get to do this. Like, what an honor. Going to Fog Allen on Friday night. I've been there many times before, as a student manager, as a athletic department employee, as a fan, and just walking in there and saying, it's still the exact same place, but now there's a greater sense of responsibility, and that's where I would tell you it's a great, but it's a different feeling. Walking out of that game last night disappointed with the outcome, you're not just upset as a fan, but you're also like, hey, how can I be part of the solution to help us get back on track, and feel a sense of responsibility to be a thought partner with Coach Drew to get us back to where we know we should be. So I can't say enough good words. I tell people from a faith perspective, like, if you don't believe in God, let me tell you the journey I've been on over the last 7 years, because there's no other way you can explain it.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd also just say, as far as being more out, being able to talk to you guys from a media perspective, I wanted to two-part. One, I wanted to do it as soon as possible, because I think the relationship and the dialogue is very, very important. But I wanted to do so in a knowledgeable capacity, and I needed to consume the state of our department, state of college athletics, understand it, get to a lot of folks internally as quick as I could. So I was an informed communicator on behalf of our department. And I'm also a big believer, I'd like to, if I was honest, I'd love to have more specific to speak to in terms of actions, because I want to show me, don't tell me type of stuff, and I would like to be able to say, hey, point to some specific things that I can speak to reflect what we're trying to do as a department. And there's a balance that's at play here. I'm not going to go in a hole for too long and not make myself available, but all those other factors certainly are part of the conversation as well too.
Sure. How are you as a fan? Like, when you're watching a game,
sure.
Like, are you living and dying with every play?
Yeah.
Are you sort of chill, or?
Yeah, as a true fan, I'm pretty into it. I will say, probably my dog and my wife and kids at home know if it's an intense game. Maybe it's good to leave Dad in the other room. The poor dog probably gets a little scared, both in the good and bad ways, from an emotion standpoint. And it matters. It's something from the very beginning of being a fan. I grew up as a fan of Baylor athletics, and so it's the fabric. But I certainly recognize the importance of not living and dying on the emotions of one play or one game, and the much bigger picture that has to be at play. There's definitely a part of me that thinks it's beneficial to still feel the energy and the excitement associated with being a fan, because I think that helps me relate and be empathetic to our fans and to our coaches and to our players about the emotions they go through. So I certainly don't want to be stoic and a robot as it relates to just watching games, but there's definitely an aspect of me that's like looking for spots in the arena where I can go and just sit and watch and be undistracted and really engulf myself in the game and be able to respond. I'll realize that you sit down low, or you're close to the action. There's definitely a different layer of scrutiny applied to your actions, and your can't yell at the refs, can't make demonstrative hand gestures when you're upset with the call or whatever it is, and throw your hands in the air. I had one moment where I was like, oh, can't do that down here. Let's let the game play itself. So that part is an adjustment, but it's I think there's a happy medium to be found there, and I'm not worried about that piece.
Yeah.
Has anything about this job surprised you now that you're, month and a half or 2 months in, whatever? Have you been surprised by anything now that you're here?
I don't mean to say this in an arrogant way, but honestly, not really. I lived in college athletics for 12 years as a full-time employee, and for 6 years prior to that as a student in athletics. So I really have 18 years of experience, almost 2 decades of working in college athletics, and so this is a different perspective for sure. But I wouldn't say there's anything that has surprised me. I think understanding the complexity of the NIL dynamic has certainly, been the biggest probably time for me. But I think I came in with such, I don't want to say low expectations, but such probably understanding of the complexity on the onset of what it would look like, that I don't know if there's any way more for it to be more, the actual experience to be more complex than what I anticipated, prior to stepping in the seat.
Did it still take time to get up to speed with some of those complexities, especially
sure.
NIL? That is
for sure
an ocean that is so deep.
Every day. I mean, the D1 ticker is a great resource for just capturing all the different ongoings and knowledge of the industry, and that's the first thing I'm checking out in my phone each morning, and just trying to really educate myself and learn perspectives and hear all the different ideas that are being out there. And I would tell you from my seat, I'm not ready to speak into any of the solutions at this point. Like, I want to spend my time focusing on how does Baylor navigate the realities of where we're at right now, and hopefully where we're going in the near future. And I think that's where my time is best suited. I certainly have respected and learned and gained insight from a lot of very knowledgeable, experienced professionals in the industry and leaders in the industry that have recommendations for how this is going to get best solved to bring stability to it. But I don't think I'm ready to be a part of that conversation at this point. I have a lot to learn, and I want to focus my time on how does Baylor best navigate the moment. It's probably the number one priority for me at this point.
Is it the wild, wild west? Are there more rules and boundaries that we don't see? Because it sometimes just feels like everybody's flying blind on this thing.
All the above.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of people in really tough positions. I think that the timing of the way this is all played out, even the House settlement last year, the timing of when that actually was finalized, if you will remember, I mean, they're in the midst of saying, hey, we've got to start deploying these NIL agreements for our student athletes if this is going to happen. I mean, the season is right on, the academic year is right on the cusp. And so I think really ever since that, it's created a very complex dynamic where I really do think everybody's trying to do the best that they can. But whether it be the enforcement side of the equation or the administrators or the coaches, it definitely feels reactionary to some degree in terms of just trying to, okay, where do we stand? I mean, even the CSC put out guidance. If you guys, I'm sure, saw it at the end of last week, and I think that was definitely helpful, but it was a need probably even earlier just to say, hey, we're in the middle of the portal season. This guidance is helpful, but maybe even we could use it a couple weeks ago. Just as we all kind of say, hey, let's make sure we've got clarity around the rules and how these are all going to be enforced. So I would say that I think everyone has the best of intent, but it is definitely a situation where timing-wise, we're all trying to figure out, catch up to speed, and it feels much more of a reactionary environment than what I would say the ideal proactive environment might be to establish protocols and rules and really set up the best, most healthiest organization, which is the NCAA and college sports as a whole.
You say you talked to plenty of people in the industry to get up to speed.
Yeah.
Who? I think you mentioned Jeremiah Dickey.
Yes.
Have you talked to Mack at all?
I haven't had any extensive conversation with Mack, but certainly respect and appreciate the time that I had with him. But yeah, Jeremiah, fortunate to still call him a friend. There's other Big 12 ADs that I've had previous relationship with. Chad Weiberger, somebody that I knew well at Oklahoma State. Ren Baker is a gentleman I knew well at West Virginia. Really respected Jenny Pollard at Iowa State. He's been there for a long time and is a very candid, transparent AD. So admire him and eagerly listen to his words and advice. Brian Santiago is a guy at BYU who is similar trajectory in the sense that he'd been with BYU forever and got that job. So fortunate to exchange some messages with him and certainly follow what he's doing and have a lot of respect for the leadership that he's provided. One of my best mentors is a guy named Peter Pilling, who was at BYU, now the AD at Columbia, and he deals with a different dynamic as it relates to NIL, but just highly respected individual who's been in college athletics his whole life, and he's been a great resource even prior to getting this opportunity. So I'm getting up to speed with a lot of these guys. Have probably had 3 or 4 conversations with the commissioner. Fortunate to have him in town tonight, and he's been on the standby for anything that I need. And honestly, I would tell you the greatest resource I have at my disposal is our president. President Livingstone is highly respected and very involved in numerous leadership aspects of the NCAA. Is really, I think, perceived as a thought leader for the entire industry. And so she is obviously very knowledgeable, and I say that's a strategic advantage that I have, is just someone who's as dialed in as she is in the general landscape, because she's always, available and accessible for interpretation or just education, just context or knowledge. So feel very supportive and feel like I've got a great Rolodex of contacts that are on standby to help when needed.
I wanted to ask you about facilities. Is there anything pressing? What do you see as sort of like the next upgrade or whatever in facilities?
Well, I think we have to acknowledge just the track record of what's happened over the last decade. And we're sitting here and we're looking at the Fudge facility and Allison Indoor, and you got McLean around the corner, and we got Foster behind us. I mean, this university and its constituencies, its donor base has done a lot in a significant period of time. With a relatively small alumni base, I mean, it's really impressive and a testament to the leadership, the vision, to the board, the president, leadership of athletics, and the donors for what's been accomplished here. And so I think the good news is that a lot of the major projects have been accomplished in track. I want to leave that out. I'm looking at it as well too. A lot of the pressing needs have been addressed. I think we certainly have recently made an announcement and have the honor of receiving a very generous gift from the Gaines as it relates to Baylor Ballpark, and I would say that's a desperate need for us. Is that facility has been largely untouched since it's opened, which was ironically my freshman year in college, and I remember that very well. And it needs some support and it needs some attention, and I think this is a lead gift that will help us get there. We're close. Softball just redid their locker room. Had a chance to tour that yesterday. It's a great facility. Our tennis facility has been nationally, I think it was nationally ranked as the best college tennis facility in the country. Have hosted national championships. I sat at the game yesterday with Mr. Foster, and I told him in the second half, not an enjoyable second half, but I commented to him and I said, if you look around here, if this was in the Farrell Center at this point, I think this arena is largely empty. And I actually think people, and I talk to people, I have a dear friend that said to me this morning, there's just a joy in being in that facility where I think people hung around, even though unfortunately the game had been largely decided well before it, because it's just a great place to watch a game. You're like, I just want to hang out in here. And I told that to Paul, and I just said, hey, because of your generosity and a lot of other people, I think people are in this arena right now where they would normally have checked out, and I think that's a testament to him. So, Brice, to answer your question, for a long answer to a short question, I would say baseball is, as far as a capital project, is most pressing. There's some enhancements to individual facilities that are a little bit more nuanced in terms of small changes and tweaks that are necessary for us to tackle, and that's what's going to be on our focus. But from a capital project standpoint, I think the baseball facilities is really at the forefront. There's some finishing work that we're doing to get the Farrell Center retrofitted to service volleyball and acro and tumbling well. That is in its final stages as well. I think our acro and tumbling team is currently using kind of a meeting office space as their locker room, and we need to get that finished, and we're close to being able to do that. And that program, not to derail your question, but there's so much momentum, especially last week with the announcement of the NCAA. So much momentum, and we happen to be kind of at the front of it because of Coach Mulkey as the leader in that sport, without question. So that's a sport we've got to continue to support. I think we've got the final touches in place for that, but baseball is really the focus for us, is to get the Baylor Ballpark up to the Magnolia field at Baylor Ballpark, up to the level we need to. And
you mentioned that was an amazing lead gift, the largest lead gift in program history.
Yes.
Can you tell us how much was that gift, or at least you mentioned that gets you going in terms of what you need to do. What percentage would that get you there?
Yeah, I will respect the wishes of all involved to not disclose. No, it's okay. It was significant. I mean, it was a significant amount. I'll just say that. I would tell you, between what they have given, the Gaines have generously given, and other gifts that have already been committed to, as far as the project, I'd say we're 75% there to get what's necessary to fully fund the project. So we are close. I mean, we're trying to piecemeal this together to find the last pieces so that we can put the wheels in motion and announce the plans of exactly what's in the works and start to break ground, because that's so symbolic, from a program standpoint, is to say, hey, construction progress is going over here, even without having access to it, for Mitch and that program to be able to say, hey, this is a commitment. It's important from a recruiting standpoint, even in the transfer portal era that we live in. People want to see that it matters, and I say often, if we're going to make a decision to compete in the sport, we want to be able to win in the sport, and we haven't done that in baseball at the level that we need to, and what our expectations are. And part of that, I think, equation is supporting with an enhanced facility.
Is there a shifting focus though when it comes to facilities? When you go to Mr. Fudge or Mr. Foster or Mr. McLean, and like that you have in this quote unquote new age, that you have to give less to facilities and more focus on roster. Is there a balancing act there?
I think it's driven by the donor's perspective, because some still feel very strongly about the need from a capital project and from a facility standpoint. I will say on the whole, I do think as an industry is concerned, that the large building projects and a lot of these new initiatives of new arenas and training facilities, I think it's already happening, but I think it's fair to assume that slows down, and I think that's necessary, and I think that's really what a lot of the House settlement was designed to do, was saying, hey, there is such a arms war as it relates to facilities that the student athletes looked around and said, hey, we deserve some of these benefits directly ourselves, and we want to take advantage of it. And so, I said this before, I actually think that this recent era of building has created a little bit of short-term pain for us, in the sense that we've really fatigued our external constituency at a time where the external funds for NIL were really imperative, and the timing, I think, worked a little bit against us, where we just had put a lot on them, and so there was a little bit of fatigue that was probably associated with all these projects. The good news, and such short-term pain, the long-term benefit associated with it is, I think that Fudge football facility we're looking at right now is going to be the best football facility for college football for a long period of time. And 10 years ago, it was usually good for about 24 hours, and somebody else had opened up something better. And so I think we're well equipped. I don't think you're going to see a lot of universities that are going to make a commitment to build new football stadiums or new basketball arenas, or make the commitment we've made over here. So I think it sets us up to where we're going to be at the top from a facility standpoint for a long period of time. But as it relates to a go-forward strategy, there's the internal NIL that the university is responsible for funding, and there's the external NIL. But that internal NIL is a budget consideration, and it is a cost that did not exist for universities across the collegiate landscape, that didn't exist a year ago, and that money has to come from somewhere. And so the pressure, and that money is coming from the TV contracts, but that means that the money that might have previously come from the TV contracts to support some of our sports that are non-revenue, or scholarships in a sport that's not necessarily external NIL related, is now being redirected towards the revenue share component. And so it creates a greater need and a pressure for an athletic department to effectively raise funds through its traditional means of fundraising, whether that be, in our case, the Bear Foundation, or ticket sales, or licensing, or our MMR partnership. There's just greater pressure. There's greater needs that exist there. And so, without directly earmarking and saying, hey, I need to give money to external NIL, the budgets for every athletic department across the country have grown. And therefore, the needs from a funding standpoint have grown too. So I would say the pressure to keep up with that has also grown, and that's why we have to be better as a department to be able to garner more support to the Bear Foundation. We've got to do a better job of outreach to sell tickets, not just have more people and fans, but we need the revenue associated with it. And we've got to explore what are non-traditional ways for an athletic department to generate revenue that they previously haven't been doing.
I wanted to transition to football a little bit.
Sure.
Dave has talked about it in terms of saying we need to win.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a lot of frustration among the fan base of just how this last season went.
Yeah.
Is there a baseline of what needs to happen this next season for you to say, okay, we can go forward with Dave?
Yeah. Well, first of all, unpack your question. Dave wants to win. He knows he needs to win. Number two, there is frustration with the fan base. I was part of that. Mm-hmm. I understand it. I experienced it myself. So I want to affirm what you said. As far as what the expectations are. There's not a win amount. I don't think I'm not going to box myself or Dave into a win total. Candidly, for both sides of the equation, I think it goes much deeper than that in terms of you could tell last year. Set the record aside. You could tell last year it was our fan base. Think about it from a brand consumer perspective. We're saying we're not happy with this product. It was very clear. You guys understood it. You wrote many columns that spoke to that. But our fan base was saying we're not happy with that product, and I'm not sure a win here or there would have changed the dynamic. I don't think that the perception would have been different over 4 and 8, and I'm not sure the perception would have been different if we win a couple more games. I think there was a frustration of we are frustrated with this product, and that's a combination of some on the field factors. But I also think that we have to acknowledge that there were some factors associated with that went off the field as well too. So I think it has to feel and look different for us going forward to reach levels of acceptance and for satisfactory capacity. And I really don't think, I know people are like, give us a number. Like, I really don't think that genuinely, I'm not playing coy. I don't have some number written in underneath my desk. We've got to get better and produce a better product. And our relationship with our consumers, in this case our fans, our alumni and donors, it has to be one where there's a greater amount of joy, because the truth is that we're not leaving the stadium with the level of enjoyment and satisfaction that's necessary to sustain a great relationship with your consumers, and that has to change. And I don't know what that looks like in terms of a wins and loss record. I do know what that looks like in terms of the overall feel. And so I answer that question not to be evasive, but just genuine in terms of, we are transparent, and I have been with Dave. We have expectations that go beyond wins and losses that have been communicated as far as where we want to be as a program, which I think he appreciates, and it's helpful for him to understand what I am looking for, what matters to me, so it's not just some guessing game and some abstract evaluation, but it's a significant impact to the overall athletic department, and it's a massive impact to the university as a whole. And my focus and job is to do everything I can to make this a successful 26th year for our football coaches, but for our student athletes, for our fans. This is not a season that we want to walk into without saying we want to create a really great experience and make sure that we deliver a great product. And I just would say this, I am confident, one way or the other, to answer your question, I'm going to summarize it by this: we will walk out of the 26th season with hope and optimism. I can promise you that. One way or the other, we will walk out of the 26th season with hope and optimism about the future.
How in the weeds do you like to get with coaches, specifically Dave? Like, do you plan to, have a, Monday morning meeting with him or whatever it is?
Sure.
Like, how in the weeds do you want to get in terms of X's and O's and terms of all that fun stuff?
Yeah, not on X's and O's. I want to be respectful and certainly find people that are on our team that can help provide input in that regard. But as far as the communication level, I think it varies by coach. Some want to talk after every game. Some want space, and the cadence, I think, is subject to the coach and what's best from a balance standpoint. I want to find out what the needs are and how in my seat I can best support and give the coach every opportunity to be most successful. That's the way I look at it. Is I really see these as CEOs in our coaches' chairs, and want them to see their program and really own and have the authority and also the delegation capacity within their own program. But I really see myself as saying, what do we need to do to give you all the tools necessary to make sure that you're most successful? And then ultimately hold them accountable to the expectations. That's the way I want to approach the conversation. And I don't want it to be any ambiguity or guessing games. Like, these are the expectations that we have for our department. Our university has made a significant commitment and support and investment in this department and in these respective programs. And I have a responsibility to ensure that we're fulfilling the purpose of the athletic department, which is ultimately to promote the university and to open eyes and provide exposure for the university from an educational opportunity standpoint to people that may not previously have gotten that opportunity. That ultimately, in its best form, that's what college athletics is doing. And so I would just say that it will vary on a case-by-case basis based on the coach. And, I want to be in a broad position of providing resources and, adjusting as needed on those resources, because at the end of the day, those guys from a tactical standpoint, they need to have their own autonomy on that. And I'm certainly not going to get in there and suggest we need to blitz more or throw throw the deep ball more often. But I would just say one thing I have said, and I'll say across the board, and I believe this to be true, is I think, especially in this modern era of NIL, I think the programs that are most successful are the ones that have clear identity and know who they are. And I've said it before, I think that to some degree, Baylor football specifically last year, there was no clear identity. And, when I mentioned it to Dave, he was already proactive in saying, we've recognized that ourselves and we're already working towards it. I didn't need to ask him to do that, but I think there needs to be clear identity associated with the 2026 Baylor football program. And I think everybody needs to understand what we're going for and for us to live up to that. And I would say that if we don't have that in 26, it's probably not a great indicator for the progress that I think we need to make.
I know President Livingstone has said, get to know Dave. People will like him. He's a likable guy. Everybody loves him.
Yeah.
I believe that.
Sure.
But can a tiger change his stripes? After 6 years, is there enough room where, someone like Dave can change a little bit in that regard and become a little bit more open?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of his engagement, with the external side of the equation, I think, again, that oftentimes, that question's asked right now because people are disappointed with the results. And I said this, in a different conversation, I'll say it again. I found myself, at the end of the Houston game, I found myself saying, I would love to see some more animation on the sidelines, because I can say this because I was a fan at the time. I want to be clarified, I was not an administrator. There may have been some calls I disagree with as a fan at the moment, and I wanted to see some animation to reflect that as well. And I in that moment reflected and said, listen, this is the same guy that we were that we were all sending pictures of, that stoic look when McVay stopped the Oklahoma State running back at the goal line, and we thought it was the coolest thing in the world that you got a guy with, just ice in his veins running out there, and it was intimidating. You're like, this guy has it under control. That's the same guy. It is the same guy in that moment that was also stoic and maintained a composure. And we don't like the latter because we didn't like the results associated with it. And so, as far as like, hey, change this guy, I don't think it's beneficial to go in there and say, hey, Dave, we need to go on a fan relations parade tour and go visit every Lions Club event in Waco. I think we need to focus on what is it necessary to turn the program in the direction we need it to be and to win. And there are ways. I think that certainly as it relates to dealing with you guys, and Dave was proactive about that. I think we've got to have a deeper relationship with his staff. There's such great between Joe Klanderman and Spav. Like, I can't wait for those two guys to talk more about the program. I think you guys will benefit from that, and our program will benefit from that. And those guys are talented, and they need to speak into it. I think that's that was a lot of weight for Dave last year, calling plays, being the head coach in this era, dealing with the portal. Man, it is enormous. And I think the best thing that's happened since the end of the season to right now is that I think delegation has occurred. I think you got a fantastic defensive coordinator with clarity as far as that is concerned. I think that his strategy as it relates to how we engage with you all is going to shift, rightfully so. And I just think there's a levity over there and a freedom, and that's how we got to play. Like, what do we have to lose? At the end of the day, what do we have to? Let's let it rip. Let's have a good time. Let's have fun. We need to win, but let's just open it up and see where we're at. And I think momentum is a crazy thing in sports. And the schedule was announced today, and I would say it provides us opportunity to build some momentum. We've got a big game to start with, but I think there's opportunity even in that situation. And I'm just excited to see the season. There's so much to get to between now and then, but I do think that hard decisions have been made over the last 4 to 6 weeks to put us in the best position to see success in 2026. And as I said, no matter what, we're going to leave the 26th season with hope and optimism, one way or the other.
We've talked a lot about the fan experience at a game, including today.
Sure.
Once the ball is kicked off, you have very little effect on what can happen on the field in terms of wins and losses. But in terms of that X's and O's of what you want the fan experience to look like, what are your ideas?
Well, I think last night's a great example. You all, as someone who's producing a game, I mean, you want to win first of all, but you love a competitive game with somebody making a big shot. Hopefully, the good guys make a big shot, and that's what you're looking. You're looking for drama and story. And unfortunately, there was that last night. It was just a lot of 3-pointers being made by the other team. But we've already talked about last night, and for the whole, there was one blemish on the video board that was a technical issue that I caught and didn't like that. I know our team's already on it. I would say I thought from an execution standpoint in terms of the actual game script and flow last night, I think we're starting to see some progress on that front. I was intentional. Our folks are traveling. We had an individual that from our fan engagement staff that I had fly up to Lawrence on Friday night and meet with that team and the Kansas staff. And I told them that this is one of the greatest game day environments you'll ever find. We need to figure out what we can take from that and replicate it. And that's going to be an ongoing expectation for us, is to travel, whether it be with the team or on our own. I think some of the best investment we possibly can make is we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. There are great ideas to be stolen from other environments. Let's take the best of and create our version of it. And my goal is that people are calling us saying we want to send folks to Baylor because we want to see what you guys are doing, and that's happened before. But I don't, I would say, fan engagement, fan experience. To some degree, it's almost, forgive the callous nature of this comparison. It's almost like faith for Baylor. It's not. It needs to be the foundation of who we are. It's not a initiative. It's not a task force. It's not a, hey, this is really going to be a point of emphasis for us. That is our job. That is our mandate as a department. It's a culture. It's not an optional discussion. Like, what are we doing? And we're going to make mistakes. I tell folks a lot, and I have a recent example of one where I usually find my greatest appreciation for brands based on the way that they say, I'm sorry, I messed up. Like, I can tell you, one brand specifically is, I've got a 10-year-old daughter, and for Christmas, she wanted something called the tin can phone. I don't even know what that is, but I found out the tin can phone is something that hooks up to your to Wi-Fi, and it allows you to basically control who can be called. And so they have a small network of 4 or 5 friends, and that's all they can call. That an emergency. So conceptually, in this modern day, it's a great tool. Well, it's become super popular as my wife has educated me. And on Christmas morning, our daughter opened up that package and went to go plug it in and log it in onto the internet, and the whole system had crashed because so many individuals had that was the Christmas gift, I guess, of the year. Mm-hmm. I didn't know, but that was the Christmas gift of the year. So it overloaded the system and crashed the whole system. Wow. So this company, which if you think about it, in their moment of this big moment, Christmas Day, what's the thing you want to do? Open it up, call my friends. The system had crashed, and so I will tell you, watching how they've handled that disappointment and the levels of communication and the effectiveness of the communication, it's inspiring. I mean, that's the stuff that I am really captivated by and really study, because I think those are the moments where you're going to mess up. And we certainly have done that before, and I promise you, under my leadership, we will have our fair share of moments where we stub our toe. My hope is, my expectation is, and the accountability I want placed upon myself is that when we do that we do a really effective job of saying, we're sorry, we made a mistake, we didn't handle the circumstance well, and here's how we're committed to doing it right. Because I think if you do that well, you not only win people back, but you actually put them in a position where they're advocating and they're evangelists on your behalf.
One of the many hats that AD wears is obviously hiring coaches. Mm-hmm. First of all, I wanted to ask you about just the golf program, I guess. What's the plan going forward there?
Yeah, well, first of all, Mike McGraw is a bittersweet day, because I got to work closely with Mike McGraw when I was at my first stint. I was a sport administrator for men's golf, and I was like, what am I going to tell Mike McGraw? I mean, this guy is a legend, Mount Rushmore of college golf, and that guy's face should be on it for what he's done. he's a great coach. He's a better human being. And so it is a bittersweet day, but he's making a decision for his family, which we respect, and he will be dearly missed, but his legacy is for sure permanently entrenched. And so, I think the good news is he wrote a book called Left It Better Than I Found It. Hope I got that exactly right, the verbiage on it. But and you're like, man, you lived that here at Baylor Golf. Like, you left this place better than you found it. And the great news is, first of all, he's got a fantastic assistant coach with incredible experience. And Ryan Murphy's got, you look at that guy's career accolades, you're like, wow, that guy's our assistant coach, but that guy's assistant coach here because he respects Mike McGraw. And so we're immediately in great hands as it relates to that. And I think the great thing for Ryan is this is certainly going to be an opportunity for him to understand the program and for him to show the gifts and the talents that he has in a firsthand capacity. And I think the great thing about our golf program is it will be a highly sought after job. And I think that we'll have a great group of individuals to consider in that. And I don't want to say any job search is easy, but because of the reputation and because of the legacy that Coach McGraw has built, this one feels like there is a blessing of options as we consider this. And I'll just tell you, whoever ends up in that seat in a full-time capacity is going to be a pretty impressive individual, because I think the great thing about this program is it's going to attract some really prominent names, and I'm excited about it, even though I'm certainly saddened by the fact that we don't get to continue to call Coach McGraw our head coach.
Sure. From a bigger picture standpoint, like, that's one of the things that's going to come up from time to time. People are going to move on.
For sure.
Changes are going to happen. What are you looking for when you're hiring a head coach, just kind of in a broad sense? And have you done a lot of hiring in your career?
Yeah, I will tell you, when I left here to go work for Magnolia, it was 700 employees. So you can imagine the complexity of the hiring process in that organization and the importance associated with it. One of the things that it's in progress, but I think it's important, and I learned it from a previous athletic director, is the readiness of what they call a list, whatever you want to say, at all times for every program. And even when you say, oh, this person hopefully is going to be here with us for another 30 years, I think you have a responsibility to be always ready. And that's kind of a trait that I carried through, in this past 7 years outside of college athletics, is always trying to have a little bit of a list to say, hey, if I lost this individual, where would you go directionally? And so, I think it is certainly something that I study and I think a lot about. I have always enjoyed listening and learning from press conferences, both post game, because I think especially, and wins and losses, and understanding how the communication matters, because I think that certainly reflects the coach's ability to communicate in other settings as well. But I think it's also just as important just to study the landscape and say, who's successful and what's their path been. One of the things I did growing up, once I knew that working in college athletics is the long-term plan and ambition, is I always went and looked at athletic directors and studied what was their track and professional career to get there. And so I tried to have a good assessment of, like, what was the trends that got people to the seat that I was ultimately chasing. And I think that is also probably a very valuable tool to study who's experiencing success and what's the general trends that are associated with that. And so that's something that I spend a lot of time doing while just listening to coaches and the way they communicate. Because you can certainly look at results and outcomes, and that's certainly important, and understanding how they've achieved that. But their path, what their experiences are, what has been successful, what's working in college athletics right now, to understand what are those trends that you're seeing, and then really listening to try to understand those people at a deep level, because how they communicate is going to be imperative to how they do their job.
Do you ever sit there in those press conferences, man, Brice and Zach asked some good questions?
I do. I really, I keep on saying to myself, I just wish they'd ask a couple more. It seems like we got a little bit more to go here. No, I do. I will say this. Or there's the two of you. There's some other folks. I've been sitting. I mean, now I get to go sit in the room. I don't have to go try to find a stream. I will say one of my sometimes you need tone. One of the downsides of the recent trend in college athletics, I feel like the transcripts of the press conferences are harder to find. I don't know, you guys are in that space, so you would know. The video is easier to find, but a lot of times, I just want to really quickly skim through a transcript to see if there's something in there that catches my eye. I'm like, oh, then I want to go back and see, well, what was the tone with that? And if it's relatively softball and kind of what you expect, sometimes I'll read that and not even mess with actually seeing the video.
Football and men's basketball are the kind of the two big dogs on campus. Yeah. Is there space for women's basketball to have a long-term future and success at Baylor? Obviously, it has a very successful past, but moving forward, is there space for
I will just say look at 2026 and where we stand right now, and I will tell you that very bullish on that program and Nikki specifically. I mean, I think she'd be the first to tell you if we could have that Texas Tech game back and have a healthy Talia Scott, I know we would love to have another chance of that. We'll have a chance of that in Lubbock in a few weeks. But I think that women's basketball program is very well equipped to be not only competitive but successful in the conference. I think she's a fantastic coach. I think she's got a really talented group of assistants that are on her team. She wants to win. She's competitive. You talk about somebody that's an interesting listen in this press conference, and she and I've talked about this press conferences. Even my first conversation with her, I gave her some thoughts in terms of some of her past press conferences. But yeah, I mean, to answer your question, she's got a very challenging job in the following, Coach Kim and the success that she had here. And I think that all things considered, Nikki has been really effective and very admirable to follow those big shoes that Kim left, and that's not easy. There's so many dynamics to that make that job especially challenging. But she's, to your question, just blunt on. I mean, I would be disappointed if we're not in the mix until the very final moment to win the Big 12 championship this year. And I think, I think we've got all the tools to do it. I think Nikki will say the same thing. So I just say, hey, if we're in a position to win the Big 12 championship, then I like our chances to make a deep threat into the NCAA tournament. And what does that look like? How often is that? What's that look like? What's the expectations? And I think Nikki's expectation is that we are well positioned to make a deep run every year. And so to answer what your question was, is like, can we compete in women's basketball? I think it's absolutely yes. I think the proof is this year, and looking at this team and what we've got going on right now.
I guess I was more curious from an NIL perspective.
Oh, yeah. I mean, listen, every coach wants more.
Right.
If I found one common theme here, it's every coach saying, hey, if I had a little bit more, and what could I do? And so, yeah, I think as we look at growth, especially on the external NIL side of the equation, because, we're at full support as it relates to what we can do from an internal NIL. So our programs are at full support in that regard. Certainly women's basketball is a part of that. But as we look at external opportunities, where can we find ways to enhance that? She's actually got, she's probably got more of that going on right now. If you just watch TV and some of the local business, there's commercials. That's NIL related activity right there. And so I think that's a perfect example. I think that program certainly serves a niche community that might not be served by some of our other programs. So I think her having the impact with that program for our student athletes to gain. I talk often. I think one of the best examples of NIL. If you talk about like, hey, what's the truest, genuine sense of how that thing works? It's Bugs sponsorship with Rate. And Jeremy Roach and Bugs had a partner. You're like, this is what this should have been all along. It's a brilliant partnership.
Yes,
like agreed. This is where this thing works.
Agreed.
And that was a brilliant, partnership that I think was in the truest sense of what NIL is all about. And you're like, that's where this thing should be. And so I think it's a great example. There are plenty of those out there. I think there are more. She recruits a really high quality character student athlete, which makes that even more palatable in terms of the opportunities.
I know that you just mentioned that Baylor is 100% in on the internal rev share percentage.
Right.
Moving forward, do you still think that Baylor will continue to be 100% even if that number goes up?
Yeah, no reason to believe that we won't. I mean, this university has been committed in its investment in support of athletics at a level I think few other institutions can speak to. And so, by all accounts, our president and our board of regents have continued to step up to support us while also balancing the financial needs of the rest of the institution. We have a responsibility to be good stewards and also to generate revenue on our own to make that, to make our to make the economics work on our side. But yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that they're committed. What does that look like in terms of what's the future and how big could it go? I don't know. I mean, there's certainly been conversations about some drastic ideas, recent discussion of taking a cap off, and then at that point, what does that look like? But I just say that this is a university that you've got to look at its history to try to determine what that looks like moving forward. And there's nothing but positives in our favor to see responsible support, but for sure a sustained, committed support as it relates to athletics and investment in athletics.
The distribution of those funds you mentioned, all the coaches want more.
Yeah, sure.
I think Mack was pretty open that football gets 75% and men's basketball gets 15, I believe.
Yeah.
And is that are you going to kind of adjust those percentages, or do you expect the same?
I mean, there's a general model out there that exists, which is 75% football, 15% men's basketball, 5% women's basketball, and 5% for the remaining sports, and that has kind of been the traditional model. Everybody has some slight variations to that, and I think Baylor falls into that, or there's just some customization within that. But that number was created and was derived from what was determined in terms of how the value in the TV contracts were created. As you look at what is the Big 12 TV contract, that's what they're saying that the value is based on allocation of sports. So it's logical that if that's where the funding is coming from, that the student athletes associated with the sports that are ultimately generating those dollars through these TV contracts, pro rata participated at a similar level. And I think there are exceptions where schools have gone way outside in that regard, but I think we're more the norm in that regard, not an anomaly. There's some, like I said, some minor adjustments that were previously made, and I think the rationale and the logic behind it makes a lot of sense, and I don't anticipate that looking a lot different moving forward.
Cool, I'm good.
I guess a little bit more forward looking. Obviously, you mentioned TV contracts.
Yeah.
There's a big one going to come up in a few years.
Right.
Where does Baylor stand in terms of getting ready for that?
Yeah.
Because I mean, even Coach Aranda has talked about there's going to be teams flying and taking a bus, and it's going to be haves and haves not almost.
Yeah.
How's Baylor set up to?
I go back to identity. Like, who are we and what do we stand for, and what are we committing to be as an institution of higher learning in 2026 and beyond? As long as we know who we are and we live up to that, I say this: we're going to have a seat at the biggest table. I confidently believe that there is a place for us in the conversation at the highest levels moving forward, whatever that looks like. It's our responsibility, though, to drive it's our responsibility to give the best version of Baylor, and I think we can acknowledge at this point that to some degree it's a little bit of a fractured environment. We're not a fully unified constituency and fan base for a variety of different reasons, and we have some sports that we need to push and improve and deliver a better product on the field or on the court. And so I just would say, as long as we take care of Baylor, if we're committing to be the best version of ourselves, I have no concern whatsoever we'll have a place at the table. In fact, I believe that there is a unique nature to this university that provides us a competitive advantage and actually a favorable seat, but we've got to be the best version of ourselves. There can't be dissension, and there can't be a prolonged period of time where we just haven't lived up to expectations. So we take care of ourselves, we'll be in a good spot.